Welcome! We are on our last topic with solving rational expressions so far. And these are a different type of equation. These are ones that include literal equations. Those mean equations with more than one variable. That's all the word literal means, more than one variable. So where have you seen more than one variable? Lots of formulas. Okay, so here's an example of a formula, all letters. And I know in the past people always tend to grunt and moan that they don't like these because there's no numbers, there's nothing that you can solve. But I just want you to pay attention to the process of how to solve an equation. For example, if you are adding or dividing a variable, well, what undoes that? So if you follow those processes on how you solve equations, we're applying the exact same thing, but just to letters. So pay attention to the process, not so much what your final answer looks like. However, your final answer should be P subscript 2 equals. So I know that we did it right when your final answer is P sub 2 equals something. Okay? What that means, we have to rearrange this and solve for the numerator on the left side. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's talk about the methods that we've learned in solving equations. I need to multiply by the LCD. Our LCD, you take both denominators, multiply them together because they're different. So V sub 2 and P sub 1, that's our LCD. So this side is missing P sub 1, and this side is missing V sub 2. Well, again, if you remember, because it's an equal sign and I don't have any adding or subtracting of other fractions on both sides, you can cross multiply. As you can see, it works. So it'd be P sub 1 V sub 1 is equal to P sub 2 V sub 2. Again, I'm going to keep this P sub 2 box, so just a reminder that that's what you're solving for. And that means you have to undo how to get V sub 2 to the other side. Well, if it's being multiplied by P sub 2, then you have to divide it on both sides. So we need to divide by this V sub 2 on both sides. These divide out. And finally, you are left with P sub 2 is equal to P sub 1 V sub 1 all over V sub 2. And that is your solution. All we're doing is rearranging the formulas, solving for a different variable. Okay? And we can even take this a step farther, but with the literal equations, I'm not going to be as much concerned about our restrictions. So because we're not going to get a value or anything, we don't need to worry about restrictions for these. So on our second example, we still have to start with the LCD. The only step we're skipping are the restrictions. So our LCD is going to be multiplying all our denominators together, P, Q, and F. P times Q times F. And then we multiply by the missing part. So P is missing the QF. The Q is missing PF, and the F is missing PQ. So now what we do is we go ahead and multiply all of those together. So we have QF plus PF is equal to PQ. Okay, we are solving for P. I should have probably mentioned that at the beginning. We're solving for P, so that means this denominator right over here. That means I'm solving for this letter and this letter, but you guys see how they're in two different places, two different locations? In order to solve for P, they have to be on the same side of the equal sign. So the next step would be to subtract the PF to put it on the same side as the PQ. So you're left with QF is equal to PQ minus PF. Okay? Now, man, I have a PQ and a PF. I have P in both terms. You might want to star this step and note that you have to factor out the GCF. Our GCF is the variable that we're solving for. It's P. And you're left with Q minus P in parentheses. We'll rewrite the QF. And again, the focus should be on what variable are we solving for? What variable are we getting by itself on one side of the equal sign? P. P is the answer. That means I need to get rid of the Q minus P, and because it's being multiplied, I need to divide it on both sides. I think that should be an F. I just realized I wrote that letter wrong. So this should be F. Okay? So then you have P is equal to QF divided by Q minus F. Notice that P is the only variable on the right. Everything else, the Q's and the F's, are all on the left. Okay. We'll take a look at another example similar. So if you didn't quite get all the logistics on that one, hopefully this another example will help. We are solving for C this time. So our LCD is ABC, but we're solving for C. So I need to multiply A by BC, B by AC, and C by AB. So we go ahead and write those steps out. We have a common denominator, so I can just ignore my denominators now. We can drop them. And now the next thing we need to do is figure out, well, we're solving for C, right? Yes, we are. Notice that C's are on the same side of the equal sign. Well, that's great. But the problem is they're in two different terms. And because they're in the same term, that means we have a greatest common factor of C that we can divide out, and we're left with B minus A is equal to AB. Now, we need to get the C by itself, so that means we have to divide by B minus A on both sides. So you're left with C is equal to AB divided by B minus A. Okay? We have just a few more examples. This next one, note that you are solving for X. I'm going to circle it. And our LCD is X plus 2. So the A is missing a denominator of X plus 2. So then when you distribute, you get AX plus 2A is equal to B. Remember, we can drop the denominator once they are the same. And the main thing is the X is now out of the denominator and we only have numerators left to work with. We are still solving for X. What we're going to do is we are going to get X by itself, so we're going to subtract 2A. So you have AX is equal to B minus 2A. And then finally, we got to get X by itself again, so we divide by A. So you have B minus 2A all over A is our final answer. And one last example. Same thing, we got to solve for X. That means our LCD is XYZ. So this is missing a YZ, or I'm sorry, an XY. This is missing an XZ. And the first term's missing YZ. So you have YZ plus XZ is equal to XY. XXX, we're solving for X. That means you guys have to pay attention to where X is written in your equation. They have to be on the same side of the equal sign, so we have to subtract the XZ to both sides. So you have YZ is equal to XY minus XZ. If we factor out the X, you're left with Y minus Z. And then finally, we can divide by the Y minus Z on both sides. So you're left with X equals YZ divided by Y minus Z as our final answer. Good job.